As always, I want to start with the chart, and you have this link on Google Classroom, and I've sent it an email, so just always refer to this. I have updated it a little bit, so I have all of English 2 information on page 1, and then my other classes on other pages, so make sure that you're just staying on this page. I've also grayed in all the things that we've already done, and I'm going to continue to do that. So just go right to the white one, which is 4-6. You are watching the video of me reading chapter 2. And by Wednesday, you need to answer some prompts that are associated with chapter 2. And then on Wednesday, you're watching something again, and then you have to upload something by the 9th. Now listen to this. Spring break starts Thursday, so we were not allowed to post anything past Thursday. If you would like to turn it in Friday, I will not count it late. However, anything past Friday, I will count late. So the quiz grade, the quiz activity that you'll see on Wednesday, it is due Thursday, but originally it was Friday, and I'm fine with leaving it like that. But just we had an email from Mr. Moulton saying do not have anything graded. So I did move up the date, but I'm fine with it if you turn it in on Friday. And then that will take us to spring break, and then we'll move on from there. So here we are with the Word document having notes somewhere. Make sure that you do this. I've broken it up into motifs, anything about certain characters that pop up, and then other important moments. As always, have page numbers. And, obviously if you've read or listened this far, you're probably going to continue and watch for the whole 15 minutes. I really encourage you guys to listen to the whole thing, watch me take the notes, and just be active as you can in reading this. Some of us are really struggling with open book quizzes, and that scares me. It just shows me that you're not really familiar with it, or you didn't take enough time, or you're not taking this seriously. But we will have a test on this. We will have a paper on this. And so it's in your best interest to actually read this book and to actually answer the questions and to follow along with me. 15 minutes is really not a long time to listen to me talk and take notes. And I'm sorry that I have to pick it up and have 2 chapters per week, but that's just the way it's going to be. So please, please, please start taking this seriously and listen for the entirety, so you have all that you need. Okay, I'm done. Chapter 2, here we go. The policeman driving us to jail was Mr. Avery Gaston, but the men at the SO station called him Shoe, a puzzling nickname since there was nothing remarkable about his shoes, or even his feet so far as I could see. The only thing about him was the smallness of his ears, the ears of a child, ears like little dried apricots. I fixed my eyes on them from the back seat and wondered why he wasn't called Ears. The 3 men followed us in a green pickup with a gun rack inside. They drove close to our bumper and blew the horn every few seconds. I jumped each time, and Rosalind gave my leg a pat. In front of the Western auto, the men started a game of pulling alongside us and yelling things out of the window, mostly things we couldn't make out because our windows were rolled up. People in the back of police cars were not given the benefit of door handles or window cranks, I noticed, so we were blessed to be chauffeured to jail in smothering heat, watching the men mouth things we were glad not to know. Rosaline looked straight ahead and acted as if the men were insignificant houseflies buzzing at our screen door. I was the only one who could feel the way her thighs trembled, the whole back seat like a vibrating bed. "Mr. Gadsden," I said, "those men aren't coming back with us, are they?" His smile appeared in the rear-view mirror. "I can't say what men riled up like that will do." Before Main Street, they tired of the amusement and sped off. I breathed easier, but when we pulled into the empty lot behind the police station, they were waiting on the back steps. The dealer tapped a flashlight against the palm of his hand. The other 2 held our church fans, waving them back and forth. When we got out of the car, Mr. Gadsden put handcuffs on Rosaline, fastening her arms behind her back. I walked so close to her I felt the heat vapor trailing off her skin. She stopped 10 yards short of the men and refused to budge. "Now look here. Don't make me get out my gun," Mr. Gadsden said. Usually the only time the police and Sullivan got to use their guns was when they got called out to shoot rattlesnakes in people's yards. "Come on, Rosaline," I said. "What can they do to you with the policeman right here?" That was when the dealer lifted the flashlight over his head, then down, smashing it into Rosaline's forehead. She dropped to her knees. I don't remember screaming, but the next thing I knew, Mr. Gadsden had his hand clamped over my mouth. Hush, he said. Maybe now you feel like apologizing, the dealer said. Rosaline tried to get to her feet, but without her hands it was hopeless. It took me and Mr. Gadsden both to pull her up. You're going to apologize one way or another, the dealer said, and he stepped toward Rosaline. Hold on now, Franklin, said Mr. Gadsden, moving us toward the door. Now's not the time. I'm not resting until she apologizes. That's the last I heard him yell before we got inside, where I had an overpowering impulse to kneel down and kiss the jailhouse floor. So on page 35, we have another moment of racism, especially an innocent perspective where Lily was like, what are they going to do when a policeman is around? And the policeman did nothing at all. The only image I had for jails was from westerns at the movies, and this one was nothing like that. For one thing, it was painted pink and had flower print curtains in the window. It turned out we'd come in through the jailer's living quarters. His wife stepped in from the kitchen, greasing a muffin tin. Flowers on page 36. Got you 2 more mouths to feed, Mr. Gadsden said, and she went back to work without a smile of sympathy. He led us around to the front, where there were 2 rows of jail cells, all of them empty. Mr. Gadsden removed Rosaline's handcuffs and handed her a towel from the bathroom. She pressed it against her head while he filled out papers at a desk, followed by a period of poking around for keys in a file drawer. The jail cell smelled with the breath of drunk people. He put us in the first cell on the first row, where somebody had scratched the words, something, across a bench attached to one wall. Nothing seemed quite real. We're in jail, I thought. We're in jail. When Rosaline pulled back the towel, I saw an inch-long gash across a puffy place high over her eyebrow. Is it hurting bad? I asked. Some, she said. She circled the cell 2 or 3 times before sinking down onto the bench. T-Ray will get us out, I said. Uh-huh. She didn't speak another word till Mr. Gadsden opened the cell about a half an hour later. Come on, he said. Rosaline looked hopeful for a moment. She actually started to lift herself up. He shook his head. You ain't going anywhere, just the girl. At the door, I held onto a cell bar like it was a long bone in Rosaline's arm. I'll be back, all right? All right, Rosaline? You go on, I'll manage. The caved-in look on her face nearly did me in. The speedometer needle on T-Ray's truck wiggled so badly I couldn't make out whether it pointed to 70 or 80. Leaning into the steering wheel, he jammed his foot onto the accelerator, let off, then jammed it again. The poor truck was rattling to the point I expected the hood to fly off and decapitate a couple of pine trees. I imagined that T-Ray was rushing home so he could start right away constructing pyramids of grits all through the house, a torture chamber of food staples where I could go from one pile to the next, kneeling for hours on end with nothing but a bathroom break. I didn't care. I couldn't think of anything but Rosaline back there in jail. I squinted at him sideways. What about Rosaline? You have to go get her out. You're lucky I got you out, he yelled. But she can't stay there. She dumped snuff juice on 3 white men. What do you think she was thinking? And Franklin Posey, for Christ's sake? She could have picked somebody normal. He's the meanest person in Sullivan. He'd as soon kill her as look at her. But not really, I said. You don't mean he would really kill her. What I mean is, I wouldn't be surprised if he flat out killed her. My arms felt weak in their sockets. Franklin Posey was the man with the flashlight, and he was going to kill Rosaline. But then, hadn't I known this inside even before T-Ray ever said it? He followed me up the stairs. I moved with deliberate slowness, anger suddenly building in me. How could he leave Rosaline in jail like that? As I stepped inside my room, he stopped at the doorway. I have to go settle the payroll for the pickers, he said. Don't you leave this room. You understand me? You sit here and think about me coming back and dealing with you. Think about it real hard. You don't scare me, I said, mostly under my breath. He'd already turned to leave, but now he whirled back. What did you say? You don't scare me, I repeated louder this time. A brazen feeling had broken loose in me, a daring something that had been locked up in my chest. He stepped toward me, raising the back of his hand like he might bring it down across my face. You better watch your mouth. Go ahead, try and hit me, I yelled. When he swung, I turned my face. It was a clean miss. I ran for the bed and scrambled onto the middle, breathing it hard. My mother will never let you touch me again, I shouted. Your mother? His face was bright red. You think that woman gave a crap about you? My mother loved me, I cried. He threw back his head and let out a forced, bitter laugh. It's not funny, I said. He lunged toward the bed then, pressing his fists into the mattress, bringing his face so close I could see the tiny holes where his whiskers grew. I slid backward toward the pillow, shoving my back into the headboard. Not funny? He yelled. Not funny? Why, it's the funniest thing I ever heard. You thinking your mother is a guardian angel. He laughed again. The woman could have cared less about you. That's not true, I said. It's not. And how would you know? He said, still leaning toward me. A leftover smile pulled the corners of his mouth. I hate you, I screamed. That stopped his smiling instantly. He stiffened. The color faded from his lips. Suddenly, I felt ice cold, as if something dangerous had slipped into the room. I looked toward the window and felt a tremor slide along my spine. You listen to me, he said, his voice deadly calm. The truth is, your sorry mother ran off and left you. The day she died, she'd come back to get her things, that's all. You can hate me all you want, but she's the one who left you. The room turned absolutely silent. He brushed at something on his shirt front, then walked to the door. And after he left, I didn't move except to trace the bars of the light on the bed with my finger. The sound of his boots banging down the stairs drifted away, and I took the pillow from underneath the bedspread and placed them around me like I was making an inner tube that could keep me afloat. I could understand her leaving him, but leaving me, that would sink me forever. So we have a really important moment on page 39. T. Ray Okay, there it is. That her mother actually did not love her, and the fight that they had was when the day that she died. She was just coming back to get all of her clothes, and she was not coming back to get Lily. Your sorry mother ran off and left you. The day she died, she'd come back to get her things. That's all. God and Jesus, you make him take it back. The memory settled over me, the suitcase on the floor, the way they'd fought. My shoulders began to shake in a strange, uncontrollable way. I held the jar pressed between my breasts, hoping it would steady me, but I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop crying, and it frightened me, as though I'd been struck by a car I hadn't seen coming and was lying on the side of the road trying to understand what had happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying his words over and over. Each time there was a wrench in what felt like my heart. I don't know how long I sat there feeling broken to pieces. Finally, I walked over to the window and gazed out at the peach trees, stretching halfway to North Carolina, the way they held up their leafy arms in gestures of pure beseeching. The rest was sky and air and lonely space. I looked down at the bead jar, still clenched in my hand, and saw a teaspoon of teardrops floating in the bottom. I unfastened the window screen and poured it out. The wind lifted onto her skirt tails and shook it with the blistered grass. How could she have left me? I stood there several minutes looking at the world, trying to understand. Little birds were singing so perfect. That's when it came to me. What if my mother leaving wasn't true? What if T-Ray had made it up to punish me? I felt almost dizzy with relief. That was it. That had to be it. I mean, my father was Thomas Edison when it came to inventing punishments. Once, after I backtalked him, he told me my rabbit had died, and I cried all night before discovering her the next morning, healthy as anything in her pen. He had to be making this up, too. Some things were not possible in this world. Children did not have two parents who refused to love them. One, maybe, but for pity's sake, not two. It had to be like he'd said before. She was cleaning out the closet the day of the accident. People cleaned out closets all the time. I took a breath to steady myself. You could say I'd never had a true religious moment, the kind where you know yourself spoken to by a voice that seems other than yourself, spoken to so genuinely you could see the words shining on trees and clouds. But I had such a moment right then, standing in my own ordinary room. I heard a voice say, Lily Melissa Owens, your jar is open. So, I did skip a part. I'm sorry. On page 40, she notices that the bee jar that she caught that bee in, when she took the lid off, the bee stayed there for a little bit. But when she came back, the bee had finally left. So there was that little paragraph on page 40 that I don't know why I looked over it, but I did not read that. So there's two things that are happening. On page 40, we have a bee moment. The bee has left the jar. And then we have religious, because she's saying it was almost like a religious moment where she heard someone say, your jar is open. So finish chapters 2 and 3 by Friday.